I am not a cat lady, my mother declares, a bag of whiskas under her arm and a Maine Coon at her feet. She marches through the laundry room to answer the lament of a portly calico who is kept locked in the pantry. "No, you stay out here, Don Diego," she cautions the Maine Coon. "Mrs. Gummage has yet to reconcile herself to other cats. Thus she remains in self-imposed exile here in the pantry." She manages to slip into Gummage's chamber without Don Diego. "Well, Gummage, you didn't finish your white albacore." "Why didn't Gummage finish her white albacore, pray tell?" She directs the question to the calico while referring to her in the third person, the way in Batman Alfred speaks to Bruce Wayne. "Master Wayne wishes not to entertain any guests this evening." "Gummage desires that I take this tiresome tuna away and present her in its stead with some fresh whiskas. Or perhaps some science diet. Gummage needs a new snacky." She moves from butler talk to baby talk. "Her finished with that toonie. She done." She emerges from the pantry, the foam plate of abandoned albacore in one hand, the now slightly lighter package of whiskas in the other. She's wearing a calf-length pink cotton skirt and a discarded T-shirt of my brother's that bears down the front the word paranoia 6 times. Her hair hangs down to the middle of her back, though it's gradually becoming more and more gray. For years it was a deep copper, with just 2 silver streaks framing her face. The streaks had become a lineament of her icon in my childhood. Several of my classmates believed her to be a witch, citing the strange strands of silver, symbols of age that stood in contrast to her still youthful face. Though she has some wrinkles now, her lips remain overly full, defiantly young. Only weeks ago, a Walmart 1-hour photo clerk mistook her for my wife. She is an age chameleon. "Sit down, Carol," she says to my aunt, the sister of my father, who waits for her in the kitchen. "I'm just going to run upstairs and quickly change." "Take your time," says Carol. Now, my mother is usually an obsessive hostess, assaulting guests with hot chocolate and pillows, items of sustenance and comfort. But Carol comes over almost every day now. She's slender, with recently bleached blonde hair and red lipstick. She had once embarked on a Broadway career, but aborted it, opting to marry and raise a family. She is, however, revered among community theater goers from throughout the greater Kalamazoo area. Her husband, Jerry, recently had an affair with an amateur country western singer, Debbie. He is now divorcing Carol, and she has taken to self-medication, frequently preparing cocktails of vodka and various anti-anxiety pills. My mother returns. She's wearing a luminous gold short-sleeved shirt, a purple skirt with intricate black designs, and alligator boots. "Want to visit Gummage?" "Oh, not right now, Sherry. In a bit, though. I'll see plenty of her." Carol has agreed to help my mother take Mrs. Gummage to the vet's this afternoon. She's awfully forlorn, you know. A one-time poet, mixed media artist, filmmaker, and high school English teacher, my mother has not created work since our house burned down in 1987, destroying her reels, assemblages, and manuscripts. Duderstadt coffee. Since that time, however, she has devoted herself to the 24-hour-a-day interactive performance installation of caring for, integrating herself into, taking over, and dramatizing the lives of cats. While critics, historians, neighbors, and the mailman all classify this as quintessential theater of the cat lady, my mother often entitles the piece, "I Am Not a Cat Lady." This could be understood as a surrealist strategy, akin to that Magritte employed in his image of the pipe, accompanied by a caption which reads, "This is not a pipe." Or perhaps "I Am Not a Cat Lady" is in line with the philosopho-religious texts of Simone Weil, who asserted that contradiction is the test of reality. My mother, the cat lady who is not, wishes to keep her relationship to the cats unexplained, to create a void, a momentary evacuation of meaning where something unpredictable might happen. A vacancy could be created, and God could show up to fill it. Who knows? Similarly, my mother summons the void in her baby talk to cats. A militant grammarian, she's prone to suddenly deny her understanding of past, present, subject, object, affect a speech impediment, and recite Elmer Fuddyan incantations. I remember once doing my middle school algebra assignment at the kitchen table in the company of my mother and our cat, Cubby, a former stray with one ear who had taught himself to sit up and beg and wave for treats, play fetch, and a variety of other circus bear tricks. As Cubby blankly watched my pencil and the erratic movement of equation solving, my mother announced in baby talk,
"Cubs don't do arithmetic." "No, Hum don't do arithmetic."
She pushed her lips out in a half pout, half kiss, tensing her mouth. She spoke in spite of the tension.
"Cubs don't do arithmetic. Him don't do arithmetic. Him don't got the time. Him don't got the time. Don't do."
She repeated the phrase over and over again, chanting it, distorting the words more and more each time, pursing her lips more intensely. She spoke as if she simultaneously wanted to be Cubby, to make out with him, and to eat him. Just gobble him up. She would have cuddled with him if she could have been sure she wouldn't have let herself go in a Lenny-like moment of overexuberance. Instead, she cuddled morbidly with language itself. As Warhol dissolved the aura of celebrity through his serial representation of famous faces, as the Marquis de Sade used his character's repetition of criminal and perverse acts to purge those acts of their meaning, so my mother, through use of repetition, flushed all the logic out of the fact a cat can't do math. Don Diego is named after Zorro's alter ego, a dandyish fellow that nobody ever suspects of being Zorro. Why, no one would, watching our Don Diego daintily nibbling on his fancy feast, imagine that when he ventures outdoors, he becomes a virile and mysterious hero. Mrs. Gummage is named after the widow in David Copperfield. Our Gummage also weeps perpetually in her own plaintive mew. The Dr. Moreau of interior decorating. My mother sits among strange mixtures of animal prints in her dark laboratory of excess. Zebra print pillows populate the sofa. A deep orange leopard rug spreads across the living room floor, and peacock feathers peek out from the Chinese ceramic umbrella holder. The alligator boots my mother has put on her feet are the variable in today's experiment in hybridity. She strokes Cleopatra, the chubby Siamese who sits next to her on one of the 5 luxurious cat beds set up for Cleopatra in the living room. She continues to psychoanalyze the cats before Carol, who nods quietly and smiles her actress's smile, the corners of her mouth rising up, then tilting slightly downwards at the last moment, like a firework streaking up to the sky and failing to explode. Now, Carol is afflicted with a rare condition called Sjogren's syndrome, which makes one unable to produce tears. When she feels the urge to cry, she must put drops of saline into her eyes. In life and on the stage, she is an actress incapable of summoning tears. She often arrives on the porch, Visine in hand, coming to present my mother with a new plot to sabotage Jerry or win him back. Sherry, I've got it. We can plant a camera in his apartment and catch him in the act. Or maybe I should just write him a long letter, tell him that I love him. What do you think? Carol brings plans to my mother like densely tangled knots. My mother carefully unties each one. While she often talks Carol out of her outrageous plans, she sometimes trumps Carol with cabals of her own. A couple of weeks ago, enacting a plan of my mother's, the two broke into Jerry's office in the middle of the night to steal financial documents. On Carol's more manic days, she greets my mother on sustained pitch in her rich mezzo-soprano voice, and the two exchange operatic dialogue for several moments before Carol inevitably goes careening into an aria about the tawdriness of Jerry's mistress. "That Debbie is a slut!" she shrieks. Carol talks about the divorce obsessively. She refers in a histrionic Southern accent to the upcoming hearing as my trial. Oh, Sherry, you gotta come to my trial and testify. You could say, what, Mr. Jerry and Miss Debbie? Why, yes, I saw them two together. Today, though, Carol is subdued. Not despondent, not at peace, just still. Well acquainted with the pantheon of pussies that people my mother's mythologies, she does not mind listening to the stream of anecdotes. I don't know what to do with Gummage, my mother sighs, rising from the sofa. She walks across the room to an antique cabinet, the only heirloom that survived the fire. She's sick, moaning all the time. I think we're making the right decision, taking her out to the vets. Yes, affirms Carol. My mother draws a silver Jacobson's department store box from the cabinet. She sits back down and opens it. It is filled with photographs of cats. My mother is not a linear person, and the images are not organized chronologically. She shows Carol pictures of Little Fox, the cat to whom she used to sing her original lullaby, Cuddle Cats, in retaliation to my father's saying he abhorred the word cuddle. We're just a couple of cuddle cats, cuddling all day long. We're just a couple of cuddle cats. That's why I'm singing this song. Cuddling, cuddling, cuddling all day long. Singing, singing, singing a cuddle cat song. Oh, we're just a couple of cuddle cats, cuddling all day long. We're just a couple of cuddle cats. That's why I'm singing this song. Cuddling, hey, cuddling, oh, cuddling all day long. Singing, singing, singing a cuddle cat song. Repeat indefinitely. My mother shuffles past a photograph of a cat that catches Carol's eye. Which one is that? She asks. My mother hums. The gray one. In the photograph, the cat appears to be gray, though as it was taken in black and white, the cat could have, in real life, been deep cream, pale orange, or perhaps brown. I don't want to talk about that one. My mother abandons her gentle, nostalgic tone. Why not? What's his name? Asks Carol. My mother speaks a Z-word name that Carol forgets immediately. Then she pauses and inhales slowly through her nose. My second husband was a painter and a drunk. He used to come home and throw his paints against the wall. One night, came home and threw that cat against the wall. He killed it, Carol gasps. My mother silently returns Carol's gaze. There have been 3 people I haven't been able to save. That cat was one of them. The first 2 were my best friends, David Grant. We were best friends in high school. Then we both went to the University of Michigan. He was an art major. He had an original Warhol in his apartment. And Patricia Alexander, we sang The House of the Rising Sun together for the high school talent show. Then she went to school out of state. Both of them got married shortly after college, and I lost them. To marriage? Asks Carol. David was gay, but he was in denial. He went ahead and married, and then he separated from his wife and moved out to San Francisco. But he couldn't deal with his sexuality. He jumped off the Golden Gate Bridge. And Patricia, one night, her husband found her, hanged in the shed. A suicide, but I've never believed it. For years I've had dreams about her being trapped under the stairs and me not being able to save her. Sometimes in the dreams, I'm inside of her, trapped inside her body and trapped under the stairs, trying to call out, trying to make noise, and not being able to. I think she was murdered by her husband. I'm the one who lost myself to marriage, but I got out. I fell in love with Lawrence way too young. I was 18, and I was pregnant. He was very well-read and very handsome. He started beating me as soon as we married, especially in the abdomen. It's a miracle Norm wasn't miscarried. He broke my hands, he broke my nose, he beat me until I was unrecognizable. One day Lawrence made me a sandwich. I thought, how uncharacteristic. Braunschweiger. He had hidden an enormous amount of LSD inside. For hours, I saw only red and green. I stepped into the bathroom, looked in the mirror, and saw a reptile gazing back. One morning, I packed up some things, whisked up Norm, and got out. I became unrecognizable on my terms. I changed my name from Sharon Hartshorn to Serre de la Sea. An English ancestor of mine was among the signers of the Magna Carta. Then, after the second husband, I finally married Jim and had Joseph, 14 years after having Norm. When I married Jim, I just threw all my old names together. My legal name is Sarah Christina Sharon Christine Hartshorn de la Sea Keckler. My mother chuckles at her many names. Carol feels the urge to cry and begins to root nervously through her purse of medications, pulls out her Visine drops, and drowns her eyes in saline. Well, Carol, the hour approaches. Let's do it, says Carol, dabbing at her Visine tears with a tissue. Carol waits on the porch, as my mother has instructed. She lights an extra-long Marlboro cigarette, while my mother single-handedly wrestles Gummage into a cat carrier at the back of the house, loads it into the silver station wagon, and pulls up the car. When my father, a lanky man with a few wisps of hair remaining on his mostly bare head, arrives home, no one is there. He's coming home from the grocery store he manages. He places a carton of milk, a package of sliced turkey breast, and a bag of apples into the refrigerator before exhaustedly sitting down at the kitchen table, a sea of the last 2 weeks' newspapers. He begins idly reading one of them through his square-framed glasses. He remains here for a half an hour before my mother and Carol come bursting through the door, cat carrier in hand. Roxy has an announcement to make, my mother declares. Who's Roxy? My father asks. Roxy is a cat. You got another cat? Yes. His expression moves from puzzled to perturbed. Jesus. Would you like to meet her? Suppose so. My mother unfastens the wire door to the cat carrier, and a calico scampers out. Well, that's Mrs. Gummage, my father exclaims. It was determined at the veterinarian's this afternoon that the cat known as Mrs. Gummage is not 8 years of age, as previously imagined, but is rather a sprightly 1 year old. It was also determined at the veterinarian's that the cat known as Mrs. Gummage had a nasty sliver lodged in her side, causing her to cry and act generally like a curmudgeon. As this cat's age has been clarified and troubles assuaged, she wishes to put forth a new image and asks now to be known only as Roxy. Roxy is moving out of her cell and into my house, Carol announces. She had previously toyed with the idea of adopting Mrs. Gummage, thinking that two sad women might make one another happy, the way two wrongs make a right. Now that Roxy has appeared, she revises her logic. A happy cat might cheer her up. Carol carries Roxy out to the car, places her in the passenger seat, and the two drive coolly away. At 9:30 p.m., my father retreats to bed, as he always does. Shortly thereafter, Cleopatra rises languorously from a living room nest and saunters up the stairs to join him in the king-sized bed. As always, my mother remains indefinitely seated at the kitchen table, reading mystery novels and sipping flavored decaf well into the deep sleep of my father and Cleopatra. She sets her book aside and creeps out to revel in the new space of the pantry, the erstwhile home of a cat who suddenly switched lives and names. New discoveries threw the cat's former persona into a liminal zone between past reality and fiction. Who lived here? My mother asks herself. Who was this Mrs. Gummage? She was a being with no name and a being with several names. She was a Z-word hard to remember, with a face rendered gray by a limited and artful memory. My mother swoops up the bag of Whiskas, nearly empty now at the end of the day. She begins to shake it like a giant maraca, humming a syncopated version of Cuddle Cats. Drawn by the sound of food, or perhaps by the Latin rhythm, Don Diego appears at her feet. She does not finish the song, but pours all the rhythm, the remaining morsels of Whiskas, onto a foam plate. She turns and begins to walk to bed. Mounting the stairs, she pauses, thinking that she hears the distant cry of a lost, hungry feline. She continues on her way. The stairs are loud and creaky, and she barely hears the subtle noise of her own soul trapped and shifting beneath them.